Hello students, in this session I am going to discuss operating system services. Previous session I have discussed about what is operating system functions. Now this is similar to that of previous concept, which are almost similar, and again we have one more concept called as system calls, which is similar to this, or it is related to the previous topic also. So operating system functions, based on that, if you understand that concept, you can also understand what is operating system services, and you can also understand what is system calls. Okay, now coming for what is operating system services is, what are the functions or what are the important tasks that is done by your operating system. The important tasks can be divided into these things, like program execution and execution in the sense. So we have discussed this concept many times, like whenever you have any program, so that program what you write, that will be in high level language. Okay, so any C, C++ or any kind of programming language that you are going to write, it will be in a high level language. This high level language, once you compile or once you do interpretation, it is going to generate object code. Okay, so this object code will be in machine level language. Okay, now if this wants to be executed, this is a program now which can be understood by your computer. Now if this has to be executed, this has to be loaded onto our memory called as RAM, which will be directly accessed by your CPU. Okay, so here it is called as program, and once it is loaded onto the RAM, this loading function is done by your operating system. So when a program wants to be executed, we need to do, first thing is we need to load the object program onto the RAM. Next, once it has been loaded onto the RAM, we'll start allocating CPU for it. So whenever we start allocating CPU for it, it starts execution. Okay, so after completion of execution, so we are going to remove that program from the RAM. So this is how program will be executed. If you want to, let us say, the operating system will be responsible for these functions, like loading the program onto the RAM, allocating the CPU for the RAM for execution. Once the allocation is completed, we are going to remove the program from the RAM, and again it is also responsible for process to process communication, so or process synchronization. We'll call it as process synchronization. I told you in the previous concept or previous example, like if you have two programs, one is your MS Word and one more is your MS Excel. If two softwares are running simultaneously, you have the devices like your monitor, keyboard and your mouse device. Okay, now we have the concept called as process synchronization. Okay, what is process synchronization is? Process synchronization will help us to manage the hardware devices or the resources, in the sense, say for example, if this device, that is MS Word, is using keyboard, mouse and monitor, the other device cannot use these devices. As you know, if you are using any particular application, if you have opened MS Word, the mouse and keyboard will be under the control of the MS Word. If you want to select other application, if I select other application, this application cannot access monitor, keyboard as well as mouse. Now these devices will be under the control of MS Excel. So what is process synchronization is, if one process is using the devices, other process will go to wait state. Okay, so if one process is using the devices or the resources, other process will go to wait state. So until whichever the process that is using the resources has released the resources, it will be in the waiting state. So once this is completed, the other process can access the resources. So that is one of the function of your operating system, which will be coming under process execution. And other than that, we'll also have one more concept called as deadlock. Okay, so what is deadlock is, say for example, it is just for an example. If this device, keyboard will be used by Excel, and mouse is also used by Excel, and monitor is also used by Excel. Suppose I want to play, or I want to produce some sound or animation in the speaker. Suppose I have a speaker connected to the computer, and this speaker will be used by one more device, say VLC player. A VLC player is playing the song, and song will be given the output in the speaker. Okay, now if MS Excel wants to access this device, since this device is used by let us say your speaker, VLC player, so Excel cannot use it because it has already been used by some other program. Now this VLC player, again it will be waiting for keyboard and mouse for changing the song or something like that. If this device is using these, if this program is using these devices, and this program is using this device, so in the sense Excel is waiting for speaker and VLC player is waiting for keyboard and mouse. In this case, until Excel releases keyboard and mouse, VLC player cannot use it. Until VLC player releases speaker, Excel cannot release keyboard and mouse. So this will be in the form of a circular wait, so which will form something called as deadlock. We have a separate chapter, or in detail discussion we are going to do, which is the concept called as deadlock. Deadlock is simply like if one program is waiting for a resource and that resource will be used by some other program. Okay, say if I want to give simple example, so you have two programs and say two resources. Have program 1 and I have program 2, or process 1 and process 2. If process 1 is waiting for resource 1 and this resource 1 is used by P2 or process 2, again we have one more resource, resource 2. This will be used by P1, but P2 is waiting for resource 2. In the sense, this device is waiting for R2 and this device is using R2, or this process is using R2. Again, this process is waiting for R1, where R1 is used by one more process. This type of state will consider as deadlock. So regarding these things and how to avoid the deadlocks, that is handled by your function called as that is say program execution. And next, coming for IO operations. IO operations is which represents, so whenever you want to do any input, if you want to read or write data, how to read data, how to write data, how to communicate between one device and other device, those things will be taken care by your, or those functions will consider as input output operations. In the sense, for example, if you have the CPU and this CPU will be connected to keyboard and this will be connected to monitor also. Okay, now if the program wants to read the data, so we can read the data from the keyboard. So once the data is read, it is going to be written onto the monitor. This state or these functions will nothing consider it as IO operations. So IO operations, which is like read or write, and when to read, when to write. So these permissions or these functions or these type of actions will be taken care by your operating system. Okay, so next topic is we'll discuss about what is file system. File system is now, so previously we have discussed these functions like what is process, what is IO, and what is process execution. So IO is like we have discussed the things like whenever you want to read the data from the devices or write the data onto the devices, or whenever you are executing any program, if you need the data, so those functions will be taken care by your IO operation, which is nothing but reading or writing the data from the devices or any files. Okay, now when you consider file system or file management, in this case, for example, when you want to read the data or write the data onto some like say files. So we have some files, like say for example, simply to consider, if you are using any audio player, say for example VLC player. So when you are playing VLC player, suppose if you have any song, that song will be having some extension like .mp3. Okay, now you may have not only one player, you have Windows Media Player or something like that. We have many types of softwares or applications which will be using this file for playing the music. It can be used by VLC player or it can be used by Windows Media Player. So if that is the case, so this file system or file management, in the sense, the operating system will be responsible for which application can use, or you have the functions like read, write, as well as execute. Okay, so we have three basic types of functions. One is read, write, as well as execute. Read in the sense, whatever information that you are going to have in the file, you can read it, in the sense I can access that information. Write is, you have the function or you have the permission to change the data. Whatever data that you have in the file, you have the permission to change the data, then it will be write. Similarly, execute is, you can only use it but you cannot do any changes. You cannot read it, you cannot write it, or you cannot do any changes. You can just execute that program. So these kind of permissions can be allocated with the help of your operating system. Your operating system will be responsible for providing permissions like read, write, or execute. Say, in the sense, if one file is reading this particular file, which is mp3 file, the other file should be waiting until this function or this program has finished reading. So these type of functions, like how to read the file, how to give the permissions for the file, and different functions that is included in creating a file, deleting a file, or modifying a file, those kind of functions will be taken care by the operating system, which is nothing but file management operation. And then coming for communication. Communication is, we have many devices that is connected to your computer. So if you have many devices that is connected to the computer, for each and every device we'll have something called as device drivers. Okay, so device drivers or the software which will be directly accessing the devices. In the sense, if I have a keyboard, we'll have some set of softwares or programs that will be accessing each and every information that is present in the keyboard, which is like your device drivers, keyboard drivers. Similarly, for mouse also, for any kind of hardware device, we'll have some set of softwares which will be accessing the devices separately. So in that case, so the communication between one device and other device, say once the keyboard has given some information, that has to be sent to the CPU and that has to be displayed on the monitor. And so this information, that is the data, will be flowing from keyboard to CPU and CPU to monitor. So this type of communication, or when you do any kind of action using one device, that will be affected in the other device. So it is going to have some communication, and it can be in the same device or it can be through network. Suppose I have two computers, computer 1 and computer 2. So these two computers are connected to a common printer. So you have a printer, and that printer is connected to two computers. In that case also, if computer 1 has given some files for printing, computer 2 has given some files for printing. So these details or these files will be stored in a queue. We have studied in data structure, it will be stored in the queue. That is first in, first out. Whichever request is given by which computer, that information according to that is going to be stored into a memory. According to that, it is going to execute, or it is going to print the that is going to produce the printout. Okay, so that is, it is going to establish the communication between within the device or within other device also. That is error detection, as we have discussed in the previous topic itself. Error detection is whenever you have any type of mistakes or it is going to check for any different types of errors, like it may be a CPU error, it may be a device input output device error, or something like that. There is a crash of your hard disk has crashed or something like that, your keyboard is not working properly. These type of errors will be checked by your operating system, which is like error detection. And resource allocation that I have discussed just now. So if you are using one particular program like MS Word, it needs the resources like your monitor, keyboard, mouse. So these are the resources that will be allocated for MS Word. So these type of functions, that is which program needs which resources, allocating it, and after completion of the execution, that resource will be used by other programs. These kind of concepts will be nothing but we'll consider as resource allocation. And protection, that we have discussed in the previous class also, which is like your security. So operating system will be also responsible for providing security for the content or the data that is present in your say computer. Okay, this is about the details regarding what is the different types of services that is provided by your operating system. Hope this is clear. In the next session I am going to discuss the other topics.